So you got excited, you started your e-commerce store, and then you run into the same problem every e-commerce store owner runs into. You get traffic, because that's very easy, but the traffic doesn't convert. So today I'm going to show you exactly the steps required to take to understand where the problem is at and how to fix it. And I will show you it's a lot easier than you think. You just need a checklist, a methodology that helps you figure this out. Now, I've seen many e-commerce brands from the inside as a CRO agency. I've seen small stores just starting out, but I've also seen stores doing more than $10 million every single month. So today I'm going to show you exactly these secret insights that help you grow your business and get out of the starting phase. So let's just dive right in. Right, so the first problem, traffic but no sales. Everybody runs into this. And today I'll cover 4 chapters, and it's a diagnostic process we're going to follow. We see if the issue is there. If not, we go to the next chapter. The first one is, do you even have a conversion rate problem, right? I often look at our own visitor P&L, where we look at the numbers, what a visitor costs and what does it make. The second one is, where does the leak actually happen? What's the conversion autopsy? Because these conversions are dead and we need to bring them back, right? Fixed list to figure out what to solve, and then as last we have, how do we know it's actually working? First, okay, chapter 1, is there even a conversion rate problem? Now the first thing you need to figure out is, what is a visitor worth? And you do this not by looking at the conversion rate. You do this by looking at the average order value and the conversion rate. That tells you, in this case with $80 AOV and 1.2% conversion rate, that every visitor is worth $1.02. Then you know, of course, how much you could spend to acquire a click. Now, of course, you also have your profit margin, but if you don't have many sales, it becomes much more difficult to calculate this. But this is a good starting point. This is where you need to focus on first before you start fixing, because at the end, we're going to compare this number again. Good. Now, you could certainly buy the wrong traffic. This is very normal, especially when you're starting out. You're trying to figure out what's the right audience, but also the pixels haven't really developed yet. So an easy way to look at it is your bounce rate and the time spent on site. If the bounce rate is above 70-80%, you know people are most likely not even evaluating your product. They're leaving right away. And if they're only spending less than 60 seconds, they're definitely not investigating all the little details about the product or about your business, right? So if these are very high, probably the traffic is not right. Now, do keep in mind, if you're running paid ads, the conversion rate is much lower than when you use different traffic channels, right? Cold traffic is completely new. They don't know who you are, what you're selling, and they're actually just doing something else in most cases. And they just see your ad, so they come to your site. Good. Now, if this indicates that the engagement and everything is good, so then the traffic is probably right. Then you have an issue on your store. Now, here's a quick overview. Email traffic converts between 4 and 5.5% in the conversion rate. That is very high. But these people already signed up. They already know who you are, right? Organic, 2.5%, 3%, and paid social is the lowest, around 1%. So just be aware, it is low, it is tough. Good. Now, to show you an actual example, this is a real A/B test that we ran, and it shows you the difference in conversion rate. So here we can see Klaviyo, an email tool, right? Conversion rate 3.5%. Great. And then the per session value, which is a combination of conversion rate and average order value, is $5.50. Now, if we look at Facebook, the conversion rate is just above 0.5%. And therefore, the per session value is about $1.9. This is much lower than email, right? But these customers haven't been warmed up. Now, if we look at the bounce rate of this same site, we can see that here it's about 50%. This is very good. Of course, it's not great, but it's still very good. You know this is the right audience and that they are considering your product. Now, one thing to keep in mind when it comes to bounce rate is, if you look at GA4, before it used to be someone coming to your page and leaving. They're bouncing, right? But GA4 now has an engagement metric, which is a percentage of users that are actually spending time on your site, they're scrolling, or they're triggering conversions. And the bounce rate on GA4 is actually 1 minus the engagement rate. So it's not just people coming to your site and bouncing. So it's actually a lot more detailed and granular, because if someone spends 20 minutes on your page, they could have learned everything about it and really considered it, but the metrics will show a 100% bounce rate. So the engagement rate is much better. So I would recommend to look at the bounce rate on GA4. Good. Now we figured out that it's the site that's having issues. Now the second thing that we look into is, where is the problem at, right? You have in your e-commerce store different stages. People come to the site, but they might not even see a product. When they do see a product, they might add to cart. And then you want them to check out and make a purchase. But every step, you lose customers along the way. So it's your job to make every step as good as possible. Now, luckily, also GA4 has a very good funnel report that tells us exactly the drop-off rate in between each step. So here we can see for this store, 100% of the users come to the site, right? This is just everybody. And only 21% sees a product. So before you can sell something, someone of course needs to know what you're selling. So this shows us a lot of people don't even see the product. Now, and then we need to add them to cart, 24%, that's all right. Begin checkout and purchase, for each step we lose about half. That's normal, that's fine. But here we know, okay, here we have an issue. Every site is also different, because if you're running tons of ads, you're probably sending the clients right to your product page. So then this number will automatically be very high. But that's not a bad thing, because people need to reach to the product page, right? And this also allows you to make sure that the whole customer journey from the ad to the product is much better suited for what they're interested in, right? For their intent. If you advertise a product, but then send them to the homepage, of course they have to click, and every time you lose people. So you want to make the path as short as possible. Now, if we look deeper, because we do need to find where the issue is at more specifically, we can here see a breakdown between mobile, desktop, and a few other ones that are irrelevant. But here we can see most traffic is coming from mobile. More than 0.5%, 60-70% is for mobile. But if we look at the conversions, we can see only 80 conversions, which is about a conversion rate of like 0.5%. But if we look at desktop, you got fewer sessions, but 10 times more conversions. And I think has a conversion rate of like 4% out of my head. So we can see desktop is actually doing pretty well, but it's just mobile that has a very poor performance. And this could be because of many reasons, right? We'll get into that in the next chapter, but we're trying to figure out specifically. Now you can go way further, right? GA4 here offers you a drop-down where you can look at country, region, city, language, browser. But if you click on this icon here at the top right, it takes you to the Explorer report. And that report can just be customized however you want. So instead of looking at device category, we can just look at, I don't know, session source. We confirm, we remove this one, and then we add this one. It's exactly the same funnel report, but now broken down by session start. Now we can see there's lots of direct traffic. Then we have Google, 20,000 users, and then here we have the completion rate and abandonment rate. So the completion rate is how many users reach the next step. So here there's on average a completion rate of 21%. There is a completion rate of almost 50% for Google traffic, right? So someone coming to the site, 50% from Google sees a product. So that's great. And you can do the same for other steps. Let's say begin checkout. We have a very high completion rate here for data not available. Too bad. Direct traffic. So this way you can go way deeper. And you can look at different channels, mediums, certain product categories, products, whatever you need to figure out. Good. Now, I added a few benchmarks here as well, so you can compare your store's performance to what's the average. Every industry does have a different metric here, right? So keep that in mind. Great. So now let's say we do know where the problem is at. And this is like 80% of the work, because the research tells us exactly what we need to do next. That is why this 4-step checklist is so simple. You just follow the steps, it tells you where the problem is at, and then you need to try to fix it. Now, fixing it really depends on what the problem is, right? It could be on the home page, the product page, the cart page, the checkout, etc., etc. But what I would recommend is start testing on the product page. even though your homepage might have a little bit weaker performance, the product page is generally where decisions are made and where you make the most of your money. It's prime real estate. And then after that, go to cart and checkout. If you focus on those three and kind of ignore the homepage and the collection page, you're generally way better off. Now, of course, there are just best practices that you need to follow on this page. You need to communicate your value proposition, add social proof, have great videos, lifestyle imagery, you name it, right? Guarantees. But you need to figure out what that is. Now, if you feel this is a lot of work, you can always leave your website in the comments and I'll send you a Loom video describing exactly what I see. Great, so now you did find the issue. Let's say you've implemented the solution, but did it work? That is the fourth chapter in this step. Now, we already saw at the beginning that we looked at the revenue per session, right? This is a number you would just compare against again after you made the change, because that's the holy grail. If you improve the product page by making the products cheaper, you probably get a higher conversion rate, but you will make less money. That is why we look at the revenue per session. Now, depending on where you made the change, right? If it's on the product page, you just want to look at the performance of the product page, not your full funnel, because people might not even reach your product page, right? So the objective of improving the product page is increasing the add to cart rate. But of course, that should also mean a higher checkout rate and a higher purchase rate. Because you could promise someone the world and on the checkout they realize you cannot make that reality, and then you lose trust, right? So it's definitely important to look at each step. How has the performance changed? And then how does that eventually result in more purchases? Now, something important too is wait at least 2 weeks. I imagine you don't have tons and tons of users that allows you to collect a lot of data very quickly and learn with statistical significance. That is an ideal scenario if you've passed the beginner stage of your e-commerce store. But if you don't have enough traffic or even enough sales, let it sit. Collect more data, bring in more users, and after a few weeks, review the data and see if it has worked. Don't make too many changes at the same time, because then you don't really know anymore what is actually contributing to this better performance. Now, you should also be careful making 2 changes at the same time, because you're trying to test one hypothesis at the time. If you do multiple, you're definitely getting conflicted data and you don't really know what is actually helping. Because one metric could go up and while the other one goes down and you don't know which is which. Now, if you don't have enough data, you might never get to statistical significance. I think, especially when you're starting out, it's important to just make the changes. Try to make the best page you can and continuously improve based on what you learn along the way from the data, but also from your own research. The page could never be optimized enough. Right? There's always more to learn. But instead of being very, very granular about it, try to make bolder changes. Don't change very small things, because small changes often lead to small results, especially if you're a smaller business. Go for bigger swings. Great. Now, a very quick checklist. Again, the diagnostics flowchart. Is the engagement on your page bad? It's a traffic problem. If not, you need to review how your pages are currently performing in the data. Look at heat maps, look at GA4. Figure out where the problem is at. Go very granular so you know exactly if it's mobile, desktop, or a traffic source that's not doing well. And then review what you need to improve. Visit the site, do a heuristic review, look at the UI, look at the UX, and implement the changes. Make sure you've tracked every step along the way. So you not only know the funnel steps, but also little engagement. Are they scrolling more? Are they bouncing more? Are they clicking somewhere? Are they using the feature that I've actually added, etc., etc. And then once you've completed all this, recalculate what we spoke about at the beginning, the revenue per visitor. Use your AOV times conversion rate and then see if that number is significantly higher of what you're spending to acquire the customer. Now, of course, keep in mind, this number is on your first sale. Your objective is to acquire a loyal, long-time customer that eventually spends so much money with you that the money that the click has costed you is not even noticeable, right? And that is where you make the profit, not on the first sale. And especially if you're starting out, you need to acquire customers. More customers means more recurring purchases, more lifetime value, and then the word of mouth starts to spread. Great. Now, I hope this was helpful for you. If you find this all a lot of work, you can always reach out to us and we will analyze your store and help you improve the design of your website so you increase your conversion rate and can grow your Shopify store.